To start with overseas camps, an AP reporter was recently beaten by the police and detained alongside 3 other journalists in Cameroon while reporting on a secretive Trump administration program to deport migrants there. What is noteworthy about this case is that none of these migrants are Cameroonian citizens, and Cameroon has been in a state of armed conflict for the last decade with an upsurge in Boko Haram attacks. And this is also not just a one-off. While MAGA wants people to believe that the asylum system is being widely abused and that they have no issue with real claims, just the false ones, we have this case of a Ugandan pastor who has already been tortured, that the administration has been trying to deport despite the support of much of his neighborhood. As Senator Bernie Sanders said, people like Pastor Tendo are exactly who our system is meant to protect. Another case had someone deported to South Sudan, a nation which has also been experiencing a civil war for several years, and Christians who likely face certain death if deported to Iran, a nation we recently declared war on. And then, of course, we have the infamous CCOT camp in El Salvador. CCOT is a prison mega camp designed to hold tens of thousands of alleged gang members, and the conditions are incredibly harsh and inhumane. Trump praised El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele and his prison model. In March of 2025, President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act that was created in 1798. To put just how old this is into perspective, atomic theory was developed 4 years later. We did not know atoms existed when this act passed, but Trump used it to justify deporting hundreds of Venezuelan immigrants in 2026, alleging that they were members of the drug cartel Tren de Aragua. Many of them were seeking asylum and were sent straight to indefinite detention without due process. Kristi Noem also fully admitted to making the decision to fly these men to CCOT despite knowledge of a court order blocking the transfer. It quickly became apparent that the claims of these men being violent criminals, who Trump described as, quote, rapists, savages, monsters, and the worst of the worst, was not just dehumanizing language, it was also a flat-out lie. 75% of those deported had no criminal record, which included a gay makeup artist. And out of those who did, most of them only had minor nonviolent offenses like traffic tickets. Only about a dozen, which is less than 5%, were accused of violent crimes. One of the main accusations of their alleged gang ties was tattoos, which the regime claimed were proof that they were members of Tren de Aragua. While many notorious gangs such as MS-13 do indeed identify themselves via tattoos, this is simply not the case with Tren de Aragua. Additionally, court filings show that many of the tattoos they relied on as proof of gang membership were extremely typical, such as the names of relatives, a clock, an owl, the Michael Jordan Jumpman logo, and a Real Madrid soccer tattoo. There's also this infamous video where the regime incorrectly claimed that Kilmar Abrego Garcia's tattoos stood for MS-13 by clearly photoshopping them on his hand in order to illustrate the supposed symbolism. Trump, however, took it quite literally and argued the actual letters and numbers were real. This clip is edited for time because he insists on this for a full minute and a half.
Yeah.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshopped. That
was Photoshopped. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. But I picked you, Terry, but you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree.
Trump then asked the journalist if he had even seen the picture in question and insisted they were not digitally added.
He had MS, as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there, but they're there now, right?
No,
but
they're in your picture.
Terry.
And all of this matters because they were not only deported on completely false allegations, but also because CCOT is a truly horrific place. According to one of the detainees, they were immediately forced to have their heads shaved and were greeted by a prison director telling them, quote, "You have arrived in hell." Beatings by guards happened almost every day. Basic hygiene and sanitation was denied, access to healthcare and medicine is highly limited, and there were multiple cases of torture and sexual violence. There is also a solitary confinement cell known as the Island, where beatings are frequent. Every single former detainee reported being subjected to serious physical and psychological abuse on a near daily basis. Lights are left on 24 hours a day, skin diseases are rampant, and prisoners are given about 6.5 square feet of space with 2 toilets shared per 100 people. Quite simply, this is a concentration camp. Meanwhile, Trump has already floated the idea of sending US citizens to CCOT, and Bukele was recently praised and invited to the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington. The casual flaunting of the law by this administration that we've already seen extensively is a clear pattern. For all the talk of law and order, they do everything they possibly can to avoid following it when it comes to enforcing their mandate. As usual, we can start at the top with Trump himself, who said in April, quote, "You can't have a trial for all those people," adding, quote, "We are going to have a very dangerous country if we are not allowed to do what we are entitled to do." And that word entitled is key. They simply do not believe they are subject to the laws of the nation here. We've also seen similar sentiments to Trump's from others. As Tom Homan said, quote, "Many of them don't have a criminal history because their whole goal is to lay low till they do their dirty deed." In other words, even though they haven't done anything yet, this administration apparently has the magical ability to see crimes from the future. And despite this assumption that immigrants with a criminal history are just biding their time, and the fact that they've made a habit of targeting collaterals, aka people who look the same race as the people they're after, they've made the wild claim that they are not profiling anyone. This story by ProPublica suggests otherwise, as they were able to find over 170 cases of US citizens that were unlawfully detained. And while that number is bad enough on its own, as is the fact that these numbers included 20 children and 2 of them with cancer. And again, these are citizens. There's also the fact that nearly all of them were Latino. We also have this story of a St. Paul resident who said federal agents knocked on her door and asked her to identify Hmong and Asian households in her neighborhood. And another where the police chief of a Minneapolis suburb reported several of his off-duty police officers being stopped and or detained, and all of these officers were people of color. An ICE spokesperson responded by saying they cannot verify these claims without a name, which might be difficult to obtain when all of their agents wear masks and refuse to wear badge numbers or any kind of clear identification. Additionally, JD Vance noted just a few days earlier on Fox News that ICE would be going door to door. And not only would they be going door to door, they were also entering homes and arresting people based on administrative warrants, not judicial ones. This is a flagrant disregard for the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unlawful searches and seizures, as a federal judge ruled. And as it turns out, the administration was already well aware of this, as ICE passed around secretive orders to teach new cadets to violate the Constitution, according to former ICE agent Ryan Schwenk, who recently testified on this. He was also specifically told to not write down any of the instructions.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, on the very first day I arrived at Glencoe to teach, I was told that we were to instruct cadets to follow the instructions in this memo, but that we would not write down any of those instructions, that we would not keep a record that we taught it to them.
Trump himself, by the way, seems to have accidentally confirmed the racism at the top on multiple occasions. In a meeting during the 2024 campaign, he said if it was up to Stephen Miller, there would only be 100 million people in this country and they would all look like Mr. Miller. And during a debate prep that same year, he said, "Stephen, if you had it your way, everyone would look like you." And while even Trump might find Miller to be a bit too obsessive even for his tastes, he has still employed him for over a decade and continues to do so. This is also not the only time the 100 million number has come up, although Trump likely got it backwards. Because on December 31st of 2025, the official DHS Twitter account posted a meme that said, "America after 100 million deportations." This number is, of course, exponentially higher than the total number of illegals in the nation, which is estimated to be around 15 to 20 million. But it does happen to be almost the exact number of people in the US who identified as non-white in a recent census, citizens included. Just a couple months earlier, the same official DHS account posted one word, remigrate. This is a term which has become a popular buzzword amongst the far right in Europe, with some taking it as far as to suggest non-white citizens could be remigrated. Both of these tweets are still up as of today. Finally, there's also the issue of the burden placed on everyday citizens in cities that are invaded as they attempted to navigate the chaos unleashed by the Trump administration via ICE and CBP. As it's important to contrast the reckless violence carried about by those who are supposed to enforce the law and have extra rights as a result of those jobs versus those of us who are supposed to be protected by the law. In fact, one of the basic precepts of traditional conservatism is that we have laws not only to protect us from criminals on the streets, but also from big government authoritarianism. This is also one of the most basic arguments behind the Second Amendment, which was obviously not applied to Alex Preddy. And unfortunately, the crackdown by this regime on our rights goes far beyond just his right to bear arms being infringed upon. Kristi Noem named, quote, videotaping them where they're at when they're out on operations in their list of examples of violence against ICE agents. There have also been countless cases made by the DOJ against protesters, which have been consistently shot down as outright lies in court. In Chicago, for example, out of 92 people arrested for assaulting or impeding officers last fall, allegedly, 74 resulted in no charges, 13 were filed and dismissed, and there has still yet to be a single conviction. These numbers are even more shocking when you consider that U.S. prosecutors in federal cases typically have a 90% conviction rate. But of course, these victories for the defendants don't erase the costs of their mugshots being shared all over the internet or languishing in jail for months before being exonerated. Now, following the murder of Renee Good, Vice President J.D. Vance said, quote, that guy, the ICE agent, is protected by absolute immunity. And while he later claimed to have not said this, it's on video. And the behavior of the administration in the wake of countless acts of violence perpetrated by ICE agents has reflected this mentality. A very recent story just broke of a U.S. citizen named Ruben Ray Martinez, who was killed nearly a year ago by an HSI agent. No state or federal agency disclosed it until it was revealed in a public records request. Martinez, who was just 23, was accused by ICE of intentionally accelerating his car and running over an agent, causing the agent to fire his weapon. Sound familiar? But body cam footage showed that the car was barely moving, and no agent was even slightly contacted by it. Congressional oversight has regularly been blocked. Attempts to investigate the murders of Good and Preddy have also been blocked. And despite Chief Justice Schultz finding over 200 orders where ICE officials did not comply, there has still, as of the time of me writing this on March the 5th, not been one single ICE or CBP agent fired or arrested by this administration. Not one. In fact, we have just the opposite, with the administration continuing to stick by its narrative of Good and Preddy being domestic terrorists, despite clear video from multiple angles showing the very obvious truth. Vice President J.D. Vance again retweeted a post by Stephen Miller, who claimed that Preddy was an assassin who tried to murder federal agents. The shooting of Preddy, by the way, came just days after Miller demanded that federal agents, quote, force confrontations in Minneapolis, and that demonstrators, quote, need to be vanquished by any means necessary. Noem also refused to retract her statements on both being alleged terrorists in a recent hearing. We even have Republican Senator Rand Paul sounding the alarm on the lack of investigation, stating, there has to be an investigation. I don't know who trusts an investigation done by DHS when they're the ones calling this person an assassin, a domestic terrorist. How can they be in charge of an independent investigation? But the same extreme leniency has not been shown to average citizens. Rather, they have often been punished mercilessly. We've already covered multiple examples from casual tear gassings to a car full of children being flashbanged to beatings and sometimes even death. And sadly, this only covers what's been happening in the present because future crackdowns could potentially be worse given some recent disturbing behavior patterns. In Maine, ICE observers were told that they, quote, have a nice little database and now you're considered a domestic terrorist, as an ICE agent recorded her. Despite claims by Lyons that they don't do this, Wired discovered that DHS collected Chicago police records for months on residents to test if police files could feed into an FBI watch list, which is a blatant violation of domestic espionage rules. 404 Media also learned that CBP tapped into the online advertising ecosystem to track people's movements by sourcing location data from ordinary apps like video games, dating services, and fitness trackers. The same article also notes that ICE recently purchased similar tools that can monitor the movements of phones in entire neighborhoods. The Office of the Inspector General found that CBP, ICE, and the Secret Service all illegally use this smartphone location data, despite CBP describing it as a pilot program. Leaked internal Slack messages from Palantir, which Stephen Miller owns a financial stake in, also show the CTO confirming that they have been working with ICE, including finding the physical location of people who are marked for deportation.